My name is Sadie, 27 years old, and I've worked hard to become a senior software engineer at a respected tech company. Growing up alongside my younger sister Megan, who always seemed to need extra help, I became the designated responsible one. My parents consistently held me to higher standards while making endless excuses for Megan's behavior. Last month, they invited me to what they called a casual dinner, but it was actually an ambush. Before I tell you how I disappeared from my family's radar overnight, drop a comment letting me know if you've ever had to break free from family expectations. Hit subscribe if you've ever had to make a difficult choice for your own well-being. I grew up in a modest suburban neighborhood in Minneapolis with what appeared to be your typical middle-class family. My father, James, worked as an accountant at a local firm, and my mother, Diana, taught third grade at the elementary school about 15 minutes from our house. From the outside, we probably looked like the perfect American family. But within our household, there existed an unmistakable imbalance that shaped my entire childhood. The different standards my parents set for my sister Megan and me were evident from our earliest years. When I was only 8 and Megan was 5, I remember getting grounded for a week because I forgot to clean my room before going to a friend's house. That same day, Megan had thrown her toys all over the living room and refused to pick them up, yet she still got to watch her favorite cartoon show that evening. Mom simply shrugged and said, "You know how your sister gets when she feels pressured." This pattern continued throughout elementary school. If I brought home anything less than an A on a test, my parents would sit me down for a serious discussion about applying myself and meeting my potential. Meanwhile, when Megan struggled with schoolwork and brought home C's and D's, she was rewarded with ice cream for trying her best. The disparity extended beyond academics. By age 10, I was responsible for washing dishes after dinner, taking out the trash, and keeping my room spotless. Megan, only 3 years younger, had no regular chores because, according to my parents, she gets overwhelmed easily. When I complained about this unfairness, my father would put his hand on my shoulder and say with that particular tone adults use when they think they're imparting wisdom, "Sadie, you're just naturally more capable. Your sister needs more help and understanding." By middle school, I became Megan's default babysitter whenever my parents wanted to go out. They never asked if I had homework or plans with friends. It was simply expected that I would be available. "You're so good with her," my mom would say as they headed out the door. "She listens to you better than she listens to us." I later realized this was less a compliment and more an admission that they had given up trying to discipline her. In high school, the contrast between how our achievements were recognized became painfully obvious. When I won the state science competition and qualified for nationals, my parents offered a quick, "Good job," and immediately changed the subject to Megan's struggles with algebra. But when Megan finally passed a math test after 3 attempts, my parents took the entire family out for a celebration dinner and bought her a new phone to reward her perseverance. As college approached, I applied for and received several academic scholarships, which covered about half of my tuition at a competitive engineering program. My parents congratulated me, but made it clear that I would need to work part-time to cover the remaining costs, plus living expenses. "We need to save for Megan's education," they explained. "You know she might need extra support." Throughout college, I worked 20 to 30 hours a week at the campus library and as a teaching assistant while maintaining a 3.9 GPA. Meanwhile, when Megan started college 2 years later, my parents paid her full tuition, bought her a new laptop, and gave her a monthly allowance for focus on her studies. She changed her major 3 times in 2 years, barely maintained a 2.5 GPA, and spent more time at parties than in class, based on what I saw on social media. Despite all this, I maintained a relationship with my family. I called home weekly, visited during breaks, and kept hoping that someday they would see the unfairness of it all. I told myself that once we were all adults, things would equalize. That once Megan and I were both independent, the preferential treatment would naturally fade away. After graduation, I secured a position at a leading software company and quickly advanced to senior engineer within 4 years. I saved, carefully invested wisely, and last year I purchased my own 3-bedroom home in a nice neighborhood. I felt proud of what I had accomplished through my own hard work and discipline. Megan, meanwhile, never finished college. She dropped out after 3.5 years, telling our parents that the academic environment stifled her creativity. Since then, she has bounced between retail jobs, never staying anywhere longer than 6 months. She still lived in an apartment our parents helped pay for and regularly called them for extra money when she overspent on clothes or concerts. The pattern established in childhood continued into adulthood. Whenever family gathered for holidays, my career accomplishments were mentioned briefly, if at all. But everyone had to hear about Megan's latest passion project or how she was finding herself. When I received a significant promotion last year, my mother spent exactly 2 minutes asking about it before launching into a 20-minute story about how Megan was considering becoming a social media influencer and might need a loan for equipment. I had built my own life, created my own success, and found a measure of peace by limiting family interactions to monthly calls and major holidays. I thought I had established enough independence that the old patterns couldn't affect me anymore. I was wrong. The dinner invitation came on a Tuesday. My mother called, her voice carrying that forced casualness that immediately put me on alert. "Sadie, sweetheart, we haven't seen you in so long. Why don't you come over for dinner this Friday? Nothing fancy, just family time." Something about her overly cheerful tone raised flags, but I tentatively agreed. Within an hour, my father had also called to confirm I was coming, which was unusual. In the past, a text would have sufficed. Now both parents had called separately to ensure my attendance. "Everything okay?" I asked my dad. Of course," he replied too quickly. "We just miss you. Your mother is making your favorite lasagna." The lasagna was another red flag. In our family, favorite meals were reserved for birthday celebrations or softening bad news. Since it wasn't anyone's birthday and I couldn't think of any achievement they would want to celebrate, I suspected the third option. Still, I drove to their house that Friday evening, a knot of anxiety tightening in my stomach as I pulled into the driveway of the 2-story colonial where I grew up. The familiar setting brought a complicated mix of nostalgia and unease. The maple tree I had climbed as a child still stood in the front yard, now taller and fuller. The porch swing where I had spent countless hours reading still hung by the front door. My mother answered my knock with a hug that lasted a beat too long. Inside the house smelled of garlic bread and melting cheese, and I noticed the dining room table was set with the good china they normally reserved for Thanksgiving and Christmas. "What's the occasion?" I asked, gesturing toward the formal table setting. "No occasion," my mother said a little too brightly. "Can't we make things nice for our successful daughter?" Throughout the meal, my parents were uncharacteristically attentive to me. They asked detailed questions about my work projects, complimented my new haircut, and repeatedly mentioned how proud they were of my career. Not once did they bring up Megan, which was perhaps the strangest part of all. In our family conversations, Megan and her various needs had always been the primary topic. After we had finished eating, but before dessert was served, my father cleared his throat in the way he always did before making an announcement. "Sadie, we have something to tell you, and we're hoping you'll help us find a solution to a family situation." My mother reached over to clasp my hand. "It's about your sister." Of course it was. I braced myself. "Megan is pregnant," my mother continued. 5 months along. She and her boyfriend broke up last month and she's understandably devastated. "I'm sorry to hear that," I said cautiously, already sensing where this was heading. My father leaned forward. "The thing is, Sadie Megan is in a really difficult position right now. She had to reduce her hours at the boutique because of morning sickness, so she's barely making enough for her apartment. And with the baby coming, she's going to need a stable living situation. We've been talking, my mother jumped in, and we think we have the perfect solution. You have that beautiful house with 3 bedrooms, and you live all alone. Wouldn't it make sense for Megan to move into your spare bedroom, just until she gets back on her feet? I stared at them momentarily speechless. Not only were they suggesting that my sister move into my home, but the way they presented it made clear this wasn't actually a question. It was an expectation. Have you discussed this with Megan? I finally asked. My parents exchanged a quick glance that confirmed my suspicion. Well, yes, my mother admitted. She's actually very excited about the possibility. She says you two could reconnect and become close again. You told her she could move in with me before asking me. My father's expression shifted to what I recognized as his negotiation face, the one he used when trying to close a deal. Family helps family, Sadie. You're so successful, this would be nothing for you. You have that big house all to yourself, and Megan really needs support right now. Before I could respond, the front door opened and Megan walked in without knocking. Her pregnancy was visible beneath her tight-fitting top, and she carried several shopping bags. Sadie, she exclaimed with artificial enthusiasm, rushing over to hug me. I'm so glad you're here. Have Mom and Dad told you the news? I'm going to be a mom. Isn't it exciting? Without waiting for my response, she plopped down in the chair beside me and launched into a monologue about her pregnancy, her ex-boyfriend's shortcomings, and then inevitably, her plans for moving into my house. I was thinking I could take the bedroom with the attached bath, she said casually, and we could turn the other spare room into a nursery. I already have some ideas for the theme. I'm thinking woodland creatures very gender-neutral. I felt a surge of anger rising. Megan, Mom, and Dad just mentioned this idea to me literally 2 minutes ago. I haven't agreed to anything. Megan's face fell into the wounded expression she had perfected since childhood. But they said you would help me. They promised. My mother jumped in quickly. Sadie, be reasonable. Your sister is in crisis. Where else is she supposed to go? What about here? I asked, gesturing around the house. You have a spare room. My parents exchanged another of their looks. My father cleared his throat again. We're getting older, Sadie. We can't handle a baby in the house at our age. The sleepless nights, the crying. You're young, you have the energy for this. And the space, my mother added. And the financial stability. A horrible realization dawned on me. This isn't just about housing, is it? You expect me to support Megan financially as well. No one denied it. In fact, Megan looked confused, as if this should have been obvious from the start. Of course, she'll need some help getting baby stuff, my mother said. Cribs and strollers are so expensive these days. And I'll need to take some time off work after the birth, Megan added casually. Probably a few months at least. I felt cornered and outnumbered, as I had so many times in this house. Then Megan said something that made everything click into place. Besides, Mom and Dad said if I could convince you to let me stay with you, they would help pay off my credit card debt. So really, it's a win-win. My parents had the decency to look embarrassed. They had literally bribed Megan to persuade me treating my home and financial resources as communal family property they could allocate without my consent. The argument that followed was heated. Voices were raised. Old grievances surfaced. My mother cried. My father accused me of being selfish. Megan stormed out and slammed the door. In the end, I gave a vague, non-committal response just to escape the situation. I need to think about it, I said as I gathered my purse and keys. This is a big decision that affects my life significantly. The drive home was a blur of anger, betrayal, and a strange sense of clarity. As the familiar streets of my childhood neighborhood faded in the rearview mirror, a realization settled over me. nothing was ever going to change. The patterns established decades ago were permanently cast. In my family's eyes, I would always be the provider, the responsible one, the safety net for Megan's chaotic life choices. Unless I chose to break the pattern myself. That night, I couldn't sleep. I paced around my house, the house I had worked so hard to afford, the house that represented my independence and success. Now my family viewed it as a convenient solution to Megan's problems, completely disregarding my boundaries and autonomy. Memories flooded back, playing like a highlight reel of inequality. The Christmas when I received practical gifts like socks and school supplies, while Megan got the expensive electronic keyboard she wanted. The time I was grounded for getting a B+ in chemistry, while Megan faced no consequences for failing algebra. The countless instances when my achievements were minimized, while Megan's smallest efforts were celebrated as monumental accomplishments. The common thread through all these memories was clear. I was expected to be self-sufficient and responsible, while Megan was perpetually coddled and rescued. As dawn broke, I made coffee and sat at my kitchen island, watching the sunrise through the eastern windows. Something had shifted inside me overnight, a clarity emerging from the chaos of emotions. I realized with absolute certainty that I would never be free from these expectations unless I created physical and emotional distance between myself and my family. The idea that began to take shape felt both terrifying and exhilarating. What if I simply left? Not just declined to take in Megan, but actually removed myself entirely from the situation. I opened my laptop and began researching what it would take to break my current lease. The penalty was steep, but not prohibitive given my savings. Next, I began searching for apartments in other cities with strong tech industries. Denver caught my attention immediately. It was far enough away to prevent casual visits, but still offered plenty of opportunities in my field. I reached out to my manager that morning, explaining that I was interested in transitioning to remote work for personal reasons. To my relief, she was supportive. Many of our team members already worked remotely, and my performance reviews had always been excellent. "Let me talk to HR," she said. "I think we can make this work." Over the next 2 days, I created a comprehensive exit strategy. I researched neighborhoods in Denver focusing on secure buildings with good amenities. I calculated moving costs and adjusted my budget for a cross-country relocation. I made a timeline of necessary steps: finding a new place, breaking my lease, hiring movers, changing my address on important documents. The anxiety about such a dramatic change was significant, but so was my determination to break free from lifelong patterns. Each time, doubt crept in. My phone would buzz with another text from my parents asking when Megan could come see her room, or from Megan herself sending links to expensive baby furniture she expected me to purchase. My company approved my remote work arrangement, which eliminated one major obstacle. Then, almost as if the universe was confirming my decision, I found the perfect apartment in Denver. A modern 2-bedroom with mountain views, secure building entrance, and a dedicated home office space. I applied immediately and was approved within 24 hours. With my new living situation secured, I turned my attention to the financial aspects of my plan. I reviewed my savings and investment accounts, making sure I had sufficient funds accessible for the move and subsequent settling in period. I calculated the cost of breaking my lease, hiring movers, and the initial expenses in Denver. Everything was feasible, though it would temporarily deplete my emergency fund. The most difficult part of my planning process was the emotional struggle between guilt and self-preservation. For as long as I could remember, I had been conditioned to put family needs above my own. The voice in my head that sounded suspiciously like my mother kept asking, "Am I being selfish? Abandoning my sister when she needs me? Overreacting to a situation that could be resolved through clear communication?" But another voice, my own voice growing stronger each day, responded, Setting boundaries isn't selfish. I am not responsible for fixing Megan's problems. I deserve a life that isn't defined by family obligations. As I finalized my plans, I made a deliberate choice to keep my relocation secret until after it was complete. I knew from experience that if I told my family in advance, they would deploy every manipulation tactic possible to prevent me from leaving. Tears, guilt, anger, family loyalty, even health concerns would all be weaponized to keep me firmly in my role as Megan's backup plan. I established firm boundaries with myself about what I would and would not do going forward. I would not be the family safety net anymore. I would not set myself on fire to keep others warm. I would not sacrifice my future to compensate for Megan's poor choices. The timeline for my exit accelerated when Megan started sending me daily texts with links to $1,000 cribs and designer baby clothes, along with messages like, "This would look perfect in your spare room," and "I know you'll want to spoil your niece or nephew." I decided it was time to execute my plan before the pressure increased further, or my family took even more presumptuous steps toward moving Megan into my home. I requested 2 weeks off work without telling my family. To them, as far as they knew, nothing had changed in my routine. I still responded to texts with non-committal answers about thinking things over and working out the logistics. Meanwhile, I was orchestrating my disappearance. The first step was hiring professional movers who could pack and transport my belongings quickly and discreetly. I found a company that specialized in long-distance relocations and signed a contract that included a confidentiality clause. They couldn't legally tell anyone where they were taking my possessions, even if asked. Next came the enormous task of sorting through everything I owned. Living in the same place for several years, I had accumulated more than I realized. Each item required a decision: take it to Denver, sell it, donate it, or trash it. The process was both physically exhausting and emotionally draining. Some possessions were easy to categorize. My clothes, personal electronics, and professional materials were obvious take items. Kitchen gadgets I rarely used, and decorative items that no longer matched my aesthetic were clear candidates for donation. Others provoked unexpected emotional responses. The photo albums from my childhood, the handmade quilt my grandmother had given me before she passed, birthday cards from my parents from years when things felt simpler. These represented connections to a family that, despite everything, had been my world for 27 years. After much reflection, I packed most of these sentimental items. They were part of my history, even the complicated parts. But I deliberately left some family photos behind a message my parents would eventually understand. While the packing continued, I methodically changed my address on all important documents. Bank statements, credit cards, insurance policies, medical records, professional certifications all needed updating. I set up mail forwarding to a P.O. box rather than directly to my new address, an extra layer of privacy protection. I closed accounts at my local bank and opened new ones at a national bank with branches in Denver. I transferred my funds in stages to avoid raising flags. I updated my tax information with my employer and notified relevant professional organizations of my relocation. Throughout this process, I confided in only 3 close friends sworn to secrecy. Their support was invaluable, offering encouragement when my resolve wavered and practical help with the countless details of relocating. One friend, Jordan, agreed to be my emergency contact, but promised never to reveal my location to my family. "I'll tell them you're safe and well if they ask," she said, "but nothing more without your explicit permission." During these 2 frantic weeks of preparation, my family's demands escalated. My parents called daily asking when they could help Megan start moving her things into my house. Megan herself sent increasingly presumptuous messages. I measured the closet in the guest room and my dresser should fit perfectly. And what color should we paint the nursery? I'm thinking sage green. I responded minimally, buying time while my exit strategy progressed. "Still figuring things out?" I would text back. "Work has me swamped right now." Each evasion felt like a small betrayal, but also a necessary step toward freedom. The day before my scheduled departure, the movers arrived and efficiently packed the remaining items into their truck. Within hours, my home of 4 years was empty, except for a suitcase of essentials I would take in my car and cleaning supplies for the final walkthrough. I spent that last night in an empty house, sleeping on an air mattress surrounded by bare walls that had once displayed my photographs and artwork. The emptiness felt symbolic, a visual representation of the space I was creating in my life. The following morning, I did a thorough cleaning, taking photos to document the condition of the property. I met with the property manager, turned in my keys, and paid the lease termination fee. She seemed surprised, but didn't ask questions beyond confirming my forwarding address, which I gave as my P.O. box. As I walked to my car, packed for the long drive to Denver, I paused to look back at the neighborhood that had represented both achievement and burden. The tree-lined street, the familiar houses, the park at the corner where I sometimes walked on Sunday mornings. I was leaving a life I had built, but I was also leaving expectations that threatened to suffocate me. The drive to Colorado took 2 days. I stayed overnight at a nondescript hotel off the highway, paying in cash to avoid leaving an electronic trail. As the landscape changed from the familiar Midwest to the dramatic approach to the Rocky Mountains, I felt a mixture of emotions swirling within me. Fear about starting over, exhilaration at the prospect of true independence, doubt about such a drastic measure, hope for a future determined by my own choices rather than family obligation. When I finally arrived in Denver and collected the keys to my new apartment, I stood in the empty space and felt something I hadn't experienced in years, the lightness of possibility. The blank walls and unfurnished rooms weren't just waiting for my possessions. They were waiting for the person I would become without the weight of inequitable expectations. That first night in my new home, I slept on another air mattress, this time, surrounded by sealed moving boxes rather than empty space. Before falling asleep, I turned off notifications on my phone, knowing what would come next. My family would soon realize I was gone, and the fallout would be significant. But for that moment, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of a new city, I allowed myself to feel the first tentative sense of freedom. The confused texts started the next morning. "Sadie, why aren't you answering your phone?" from my mother. Then, "We need to finalize plans for Megan this weekend," from my father. By afternoon, the tone had shifted to concern. "Are you okay? Please call us immediately." I watched the notifications accumulate without responding. The movers had arrived with my furniture and belongings, and I focused on directing the placement of items in my new apartment, beginning the process of turning this unfamiliar space into home. By evening, my parents had escalated to calling my neighbors. I know this because my former next-door neighbor texted me, "Your parents came by looking for you," seemed worried. I didn't know what to tell them, except I saw moving trucks yesterday. "Hope everything's okay." I thanked her for the information but didn't elaborate. The next phase would be more difficult. The following day, my parents drove to my house as I had anticipated. Finding it empty must have been a shock. The barrage of increasingly frantic messages confirmed they had discovered my absence. "Your house is empty. Where are you? Sadie, this isn't funny. Call us now. We're about to file a missing persons report if you don't contact us immediately." My father even left a voicemail threatening legal action, though what law he thought I had broken by moving wasn't clear. My mother's messages veered between worry and emotional manipulation. "I can't sleep worrying about you. You're killing me with this silence." Megan's reaction was predictably self-centered. "How could you just leave without telling anyone? What about me? What about my baby? We were counting on you." After 48 hours of this bombardment, I sent a brief email from a new address created specifically for limited family communication. "I am safe and well. I have relocated for personal reasons and need space right now. I will not be taking in Megan or providing financial support. Please respect my decision and my privacy. I will reach out when I am ready for communication. This simple message triggered an explosion of responses. My parents cycled rapidly between concerned disbelief and anger. "How could you be so cruel?" my mother wrote. "After everything we've done for you." My father's email was more calculating. "Whatever issue you think you have with us can be resolved through discussion. Running away solves nothing." Megan's response was a stream of entitlement and accusation. "You've ruined everything I told everyone I was moving in with you. Where am I supposed to go now? I can't believe you would abandon your own sister and niece or nephew. You've always been selfish." When direct appeals failed to produce the response they wanted, my family recruited extended relatives to reach out to me. Aunts, uncles, and cousins I hadn't spoken to in months suddenly sent concerned messages asking about my well-being and urging me to make things right with your parents. Simultaneously, a social media pressure campaign began. My mother posted vague but concerning statements about a family crisis and praying for the return of a loved one, which prompted an outpouring of sympathy and questions. Several relatives more explicitly posted about how family should always come first, and abandoning pregnant sisters is never acceptable, tagging me in their judgmental declarations. I deactivated most of my social media accounts in response, which only fueled more panic and outrage. The narrative being constructed portrayed me as unstable, selfish, and potentially in some kind of trouble that had caused me to flee. No one seemed to consider that I had made a deliberate, calculated choice to remove myself from a toxic situation. Jordan, my friend, who had agreed to be my emergency contact, called to warn me that my parents had shown up at her apartment. "They were intense," she said. "Your dad tried to intimidate me into giving them your new address. And when that didn't work, your mom broke down crying in my living room. I told them you were safe and making your own choices, but they didn't want to hear it." The boundary violations continued to escalate. Somehow my parents obtained my work number and called my supervisor expressing grave concerns about my mental health and decision-making. This led to an uncomfortable conversation with my manager, where I had to explain the family dynamics at play and assure her that my relocation had been carefully planned rather than an impulsive flight. To my relief, my workplace was supportive. "Family situations can be complicated," my manager said. "As long as your work continues to meet our standards, where you perform it is your business." This affirmation of my professional standing reinforced that I had made the right decision. When my parents discovered I had changed my phone number, they seemed to finally understand the seriousness of my actions. Communication shifted to occasional emails, still demanding explanations, but with a growing awareness that their usual tactics weren't working. I maintained strict boundaries, communicating only through my dedicated email address and providing minimal information. "I am well. I am working. I need space," became my mantra, repeated in response to increasingly desperate attempts to regain control of the situation. My family cycled through predictable stages of grief over their lost influence. First came denial, insisting this was a phase or cry for attention. Then anger with accusations of ingratitude and selfishness. Eventually, they reached bargaining. "Just tell us where you are. We won't come without invitation, we promise." I remained firm in my boundaries, knowing from long experience that any concession would be seized upon as an opening to resume old patterns. As weeks turned into months, I gradually established my new life in Denver. I furnished my apartment exactly as I wanted without considering anyone else's preferences or needs. The freedom to make decisions based solely on my own taste was surprisingly liberating after years of compromise. I discovered Denver's vibrant tech community and began attending local meetups and industry events. These professional connections helped me feel grounded in my new city and opened doors to exciting project collaborations that advanced my career. Unlike in my previous location, where I had maintained a careful separation between my personal and professional lives due to family interruptions, here, I formed genuine friendships with colleagues. These people knew me only as I presented myself now, not as the designated responsible daughter or Megan's reliable sister. They saw me as a competent professional with interesting hobbies and thoughts, a whole person, rather than a support system for others. The most noticeable change came in the form of mental and emotional space. Without the constant drain of family demands and guilt, I found energy for activities I had always wanted to pursue but never prioritized. I joined a weekend hiking group that explored the nearby mountains. I took cooking classes at a local culinary school. I read books purely for pleasure rather than professional development. 3 months into my new life, I started therapy to address the family patterns that had shaped me. My therapist helped me identify the dynamics of parentification I had experienced, where I was assigned adult responsibilities and expectations from a young age, while Megan remained perpetually childlike in the family system. "What you're describing is a form of emotional abuse," my therapist explained during one particularly insightful session. When parents consistently favor one child while expecting the other to be both independent and a caretaker, it creates deep psychological wounds for both children. Your sister was harmed by this dynamic too, though in different ways. This framework helped me understand why simply asserting boundaries while remaining geographically close to my family had never worked. The entrenched patterns required more dramatic intervention to break. Through therapy, I also recognized how the hyper-responsibility I had developed as a survival mechanism affected my adult relationships. I tended to take charge in friendships and romantic partnerships, often assuming others couldn't or wouldn't handle their own problems. Learning to step back and allow others their autonomy became an ongoing practice. As I gained insight into these patterns, I became more intentional about how I structured my new life. I pursued hobbies that had nothing to do with achievement or productivity. I practiced saying no without explanation or guilt. I allowed myself to occasionally be messy, imperfect, or simply average at experiences that had felt forbidden in my achievement-oriented upbringing. I began dating without the constant background commentary and interference from my family. Without my mother's subtle criticisms or Megan's competitive jealousy, I found myself more open and authentic in relationships. For the first time, I could explore connections based on genuine compatibility rather than defensive self-protection. The first major holiday season alone approached with mixed emotions. Thanksgiving had always been a major family gathering, and as November progressed, the emails from my parents intensified. They vacillated between guilt-inducing statements about how empty the table will feel without you, and angry accusations that I was punishing everyone because of one disagreement. I chose to spend Thanksgiving with a group of friends who were also far from family. We prepared dishes together, shared stories, and created a celebration free from the tension that had characterized my family holidays. The contrast was striking, and I slept that night without the knot of anxiety that had always accompanied family gatherings. Christmas brought a new tactic from my parents. Packages arrived at my workplace, the only address they had for me. How they connected my new location to my office, I never discovered, though. I suspected corporate directory information might have been accessible to them. The gifts were carefully selected to provoke maximum guilt family photos in expensive frames. Childhood mementos I had deliberately left behind, a handwritten letter from my mother recounting sacrifices they had made for me over the years. I donated most of these items to local charities, keeping only a few genuinely meaningful photographs. The attempt at emotional manipulation reinforced my resolve rather than weakening it. In January, 6 months after my departure, came the most significant boundary violation. My parents hired a private investigator who somehow located my apartment building. I discovered this when security called to inform me that a couple claiming to be my parents were insisting on seeing me. They had been denied entry to the building but were waiting in the lobby. I declined to come down, instead asking security to inform them that their presence was unwelcome and that further attempts to contact me in person would be considered harassment. Through the building's security camera feed, I watched my parents finally leave after nearly an hour of arguing with the concierge. The next escalation came at my workplace. My parents appeared without warning at my company's office, creating a scene in the reception area and demanding to see me. Security escorted them out, and my manager called me into a concerned meeting afterward. "This is becoming a workplace issue," she said gently. "Have you considered legal options to prevent further disruptions?" I hadn't wanted to take such a formal step, but the boundary violations had become untenable. I consulted with an attorney who specialized in family law and harassment cases. She drafted a formal cease and desist letter outlining the unwanted contact and stating explicitly that further attempts to locate me at home or work would result in legal action. The letter, sent via certified mail to my parents' home, created several weeks of silence. When communication resumed, the tone had shifted significantly. The aggressive demands were replaced with more subdued appeals for reconciliation. During this period of relative calm, Megan gave birth to a baby boy. The announcement came via email, accompanied by hospital photos, and not so subtle commentary about the nephew I had abandoned before his birth. The emotional manipulation was transparent, but still effective in provoking complicated feelings of loss and guilt. I sent a gift basket to the hospital with a brief congratulatory note, but maintained my boundaries about direct contact. This middle path, acknowledging important family events without allowing them to become leverage for renewed entanglement, became my strategy going forward. As I approached the 6-month anniversary of my relocation, I reflected on how dramatically my life had changed. My health had improved with fewer stress-related headaches and digestive issues. I slept better, no longer jolting awake with anxiety about family expectations. My work performance, already strong, had become even more focused without the constant interruptions of family drama. The journal entries I had maintained throughout this journey provided stark evidence of the transformation. Early entries were filled with doubt, guilt, and defensive justifications of my choices. More recent entries documented new friendships, professional achievements, and simple pleasures discovered in my independent life. Most significantly, I had developed a relationship with myself. Without the constant external definitions provided by my family role, I had been forced to discover who Sadie actually was. What did I enjoy when no one was watching? What values guided my choices when they were truly my own? What kind of life did I want to create? The answers to these questions were still emerging, but the freedom to explore them represented the greatest gift I had given myself by walking away. 1 year after my departure, an email arrived from my parents that struck a different tone from all previous communications. Instead of accusations or demands, it contained the first hint of reflection I had ever seen from them. "We've been doing a lot of thinking over the past year," they wrote. "While we still don't fully understand or agree with how you left, we have come to recognize that our expectations of you may have been unfair at times. We miss you and would like to find a way to have some relationship on whatever terms you feel comfortable with." I read the message several times, searching for the manipulative subtext I had come to expect. Finding it relatively free of obvious tactics, I cautiously responded that I might be open to a video call if they could respect certain boundaries. My therapist helped me prepare for this conversation, role-playing potential scenarios and helping me identify trigger points where I might need to disengage. "Remember," she advised, "reconciliation doesn't mean returning to old patterns. You get to define the terms of any relationship going forward." The video call was scheduled for a Saturday morning. As the connection established and my parents' faces appeared on screen, I felt a surge of complicated emotions. They looked older than I remembered, with new lines etched around my father's eyes and more gray in my mother's hair. After awkward initial greetings, I stated my terms clearly. I'm willing to gradually rebuild communication, but I need to be clear about my boundaries. I won't discuss where I live specifically. I won't be providing financial support for Megan or her child, and if the conversation becomes manipulative or accusatory, I'll end the call immediately. My parents nodded, though I could see the effort it took my mother to remain silent about these conditions. We began with surface-level conversation about their health. My father's recent retirement changes in their neighborhood. Gradually, we moved to more substantive topics. We've been seeing a family therapist, my mother eventually shared. It was difficult at first, but she's helped us see some patterns we created that weren't healthy for either of our daughters. My father, always less comfortable with emotional discussions, added gruffly, I still think you could have handled things differently, but I understand better now why you felt you had to leave the way you did. When I cautiously brought up the unequal treatment that had characterized my childhood, my parents initially became defensive. We always loved you both equally, my mother insisted. We just recognized that you were more capable of handling things. That's exactly the problem, I responded. You parentified me while infantilizing Megan. It wasn't fair to either of us. The conversation grew tense, but unlike in the past, it didn't dissolve into accusations and tears. Instead, my father surprised me by saying, We're trying to understand. It's hard to see ourselves as having caused harm when we thought we were just responding to our children's different needs. But we're listening. This willingness to listen, however imperfect, represented significant progress. The call ended with an agreement to have monthly video conversations, with the understanding that these could be paused if boundaries were violated. Meanwhile, my sister Megan continued to struggle with the reality that I would not be her safety net. According to my parents, she had moved back into their home with her son shortly after his birth, creating exactly the situation they had tried to avoid by moving her into my house. The irony wasn't lost on any of us. Megan herself vacillated between angry messages accusing me of abandoning her and attempts at reconciliation that inevitably included requests for financial help. I maintained firm boundaries, responding to the former with silence, and the latter with clear statements that while I wished her well, I would not be providing monetary support. Over the following months, my relationship with my parents slowly evolved. There were setbacks, like when my mother accidentally included Megan on a video call without warning me, or when my father sent an email questioning my continued punishment of the family when my nephew had his first birthday and I declined to visit. But there were also moments of genuine connection. A conversation where my father acknowledged how his own upbringing had shaped his parenting style. A call where my mother asked meaningful questions about my work and actually listened to the answers without changing the subject to Megan's latest crisis. 6 months into our tentative reconciliation, I agreed to meet my parents in person, choosing a neutral location rather than either of our homes. We met at a resort halfway between our locations, staying in separate accommodations and meeting for meals and conversations. This controlled environment allowed me to maintain my boundaries while testing whether the changes in our dynamics could withstand face-to-face interaction. To my cautious relief, my parents largely respected the terms I had established. There were moments of slipping into old patterns, but when I pointed these out, they made visible efforts to correct course. During this visit, I introduced them to my partner, someone I had been dating for several months. This milestone felt significant, allowing my parents a glimpse into the life I had built while maintaining the separation necessary for my well-being. The most challenging aspect of rebuilding family connections was navigating my relationship with Megan. While my parents showed gradual growth in understanding the unhealthy dynamics they had created, Megan remained firmly entrenched in the role she had occupied throughout our childhood. she continued to expect rescue and support, reacting with hurt and anger when these weren't provided. "You've changed," she accused during one rare direct conversation. "You used to be someone I could count on." "I'm still reliable," I responded, "but I'm reliable in healthy ways now, not in enabling ways." This distinction was lost on her, and in many ways, her continued entitlement served as a useful reminder of why I had needed to create such dramatic boundaries in the first place. It reinforced my resolve to maintain the distance necessary for my own well-being. As I approached the second anniversary of my departure, I reflected on the journey from doormat to self-respect. The healing wasn't perfect or complete, but it was substantial. I had built a life based on my own values and choices, rather than reactions to family expectations. My relationship with my parents was now defined by mutual respect, rather than obligation. They had come to understand, however incompletely, that access to my life was a privilege that could be revoked if boundaries were violated. This understanding fundamentally shifted the power dynamic between us. Perhaps the most profound lesson from this journey was recognizing that love doesn't require sacrifice of self. True love, whether familial or otherwise, creates space for individuality and autonomy. It supports growth rather than dependence. It celebrates boundaries as signs of healthy self-worth. Sometimes the greatest act of love we can offer is distance, allowing all involved the opportunity to develop healthier ways of relating. This was the gift I had given myself and ultimately my family, though it took time for them to recognize it as such. When my parents finally apologized specifically for the dinner trap that had catalyzed my departure, I knew we had reached a significant milestone in our healing process. "We were wrong to try to manipulate you into taking responsibility for Megan's choices," my father acknowledged. "It came from our own fear and avoidance, and it wasn't fair to you." This acknowledgement didn't erase the past or completely heal the wounds, but it validated my experience in a way that allowed for genuine forgiveness to begin. The family I choose now respects my boundaries, and that has made all the difference. The relationships I maintain, whether with blood relatives or chosen connections, nourish rather than deplete me. The life I've built belongs truly to me, shaped by my own desires rather than others' expectations. If you've ever found yourself trapped in family patterns that suffocate your true self, know that it is possible to break free. Setting boundaries isn't selfish. It's necessary for authentic relationships. Sometimes those boundaries need to be dramatic to be effective. And sometimes the people who initially resist your boundaries the most are the ones who ultimately benefit from the healthier dynamic you create. Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with family to protect your well-being? Share your experience in the comments. If this story resonated with you, please subscribe to hear more journeys of finding freedom and self-respect. Like this video if you believe that true family supports your growth rather than limiting it, and share with someone who might need permission to prioritize their own well-being today. Thank you for listening to my story.